Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm Cindy Norcott. I'm the owner and CEO of Pro Talent. We are a recruitment agency based in Westville, but we do recruitment throughout the country, and we also do recruitment of South Africans to work remotely from South Africa for UK and UAE and European companies. And today I'm very, very excited about a topic that's literally topical at the moment. And we're talking about how to lead the multi-generational workforce. And I find I often have meetings where one person is writing notes, like myself. There's another one who is writing notes on a tablet, and then there's somebody else who's recording it on their phone. And everyone looks at each other slightly confused and in a way not necessarily always understanding each other. But as a recruiter, what I find is a lot of companies, when they hire, they phone us and they tell us what they want in a new staff member. And we notice a lot of bias coming in, a lot of stereotypes, where companies take it for a fact that a certain person is not good at certain things or has certain weaknesses or certain behaviors because they belong to a specific generation that is not the generation of the owner or the recruiter. And I find a lot of these biases persist. I have a lot of companies saying, we don't like Gen Zs because of this, and certain people, everyone in that age group is entitled, etc., etc. So it's quite an interesting situation we find ourselves in. One thing I've realized is that diversity is honestly the keys to success, but it's not just diversity, it's also inclusion. If you want people who are different to you, you need to also have steps to include them as well. So for me, I think this is a great topic to unpack. What we're going to do, we'll probably spend 40 minutes chatting about the topic, and then there's time for a few questions and answers. So if you want to, you can put a question in the chat, or during the Q&A time, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask. But I'm very, very excited to have with us today Paula Quinsee. Paula is the founder and CEO of Engaged Humans. This is a company that she's had for just over 16 years. And her focus is very specific. It's on empowering individuals to take action by making positive changes in their life through self-leadership. So today she's going to chat to us about how we can manage the different generations in the workforce. And Paula, I just want to hand over to you and say welcome again to a Pro Talent webinar. Your last one was very well attended and very well appreciated. So Paula, I just want to hand over to you and say welcome. And I thought I'd just ask you straight away to explain or provide an overview of the different generations in today's workforce. I think a lot of people hear these buzzwords and these terms, but they don't quite know, what am I? What generation am I? What is the generation I'm managing? So yes, over to you, Paula.
Thanks, Cindy. It's great to be back here again and sharing some insights. It's something that is actually a global issue. People around the world are struggling from a generational perspective. So I'm gonna go through each one of the generations at a very high level, and I'm going to be generalizing a lot, but there are variations, because depending on where you fall on the generation in terms of the year that you were born in, will also determine kind of, where you straddle the generations and what influences you've been exposed to as well. So let's start with what we call the baby boomers. So the baby boomers were born in between 1946 and 1964. So from an age point of view, that will be around 61 to 79 years. So probably think about our parents and or grandparents' age, depending on where you're at. And I want to sort of kind of very sort of roughly refer to this as the trade era. If you think of our parents or our grandparents, it was that generation, and I'm generalizing from a gender stereotype point of view. When the man went out, he was the provider, and the woman stayed home. She was the nurturer. She raised the children, looked after the home. It was that era where you were very loyal to the company that you worked for, and trades like construction, manufacturing, those kind of things. And you were employed with that organization, and you were there for the rest of your lifetime. It was a thing of loyalty. You stayed there And sometimes even it was kind of handed down to the next generation. So you just found that if you had a son or a daughter, depending on what it was, they would then follow suit and they would go and work in that company. So, think of wood mills, think of blacksmiths, that kind of thing. That was the era. So their sort of workplace values that they bring to the workplace is very loyal because they stayed with a company for their entire career or lifetime until they got that golden handshake and or the briefcase or the watch when they left eventually and retired. It was also very community based because on weekends it was around religion or faith or church was a big thing. It was community orientated. You sort of met up with your neighbors. It was very family orientated as well. They had a very strong work ethic because you went to work and you were paid to do your job. And they were very much exposed to a hierarchical sort of structure in the organization. You had a boss or a manager or a supervisor that you reported into, and it was very much around stability, providing for my family, providing and being part of that community. And so because of the era they grew up in, their communication preferences are quite different. They are in-person communication. Telephone, as in, I don't know if you remember, I'm probably giving away my age as well, but those dialer phones, where that's how you communicated with each other. And it was very formal. It was, you address people as Mr. or Mrs. or how I was raised. Everybody outside of that was auntie or uncle. And it was a form of respect in terms of how you interacted with people. So it was very formal communication. And so the strengths that they bring to the table when it comes to an organization and a work ethic is very much around their experience because they've had years of experience. They're very dedicated and loyal, very reliable, and they actually are good from a mentorship point of view because of the way that they can mentor and pass knowledge on and share knowledge on, often through storytelling and experience shares. The challenges that this generation has is very much around tech adoption because in that era there was very little technology, right? And they can struggle with flexibility and resistance or succession planning or succession to where they need to go because that was one career path that they followed. So those are some of the challenges that they can struggle with. And how they prefer to be developed or develop themselves in terms of their development preferences is very much structured learning and recognition of their tenure. In other words, how long they've been, their loyalty to a company or a job or a trade or an organization. And so their preferred leadership style is very much around the authoritative experience based. Because you were taught to, if you think maybe how you were raised, respect your elders, and your elders are experienced and, do as you're told kind of sort of generation while you were growing up. So that's the baby boomers. The next generation that we get after that is the Gen X's or Generation X's, and they're born 1965 to 1980. So that's between 60 and 45 years. So that's possibly where majority of us on this call would fit in, or I know it's at least where I fit into it. And so I'm going to say this is more around what we would perceive as your professional era. This is where, if you think about your career path that and career choices that you've been exposed to from when you were at school, it was becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or a teacher or a nurse, or a Girl Friday secretary receptionist. So the kind of workplace values that you bring to the table is very much autonomy because you grew up having to kind of take care of yourself and survive with the minimum, the bare minimum, because the generation before, there wasn't a lot of abundance or a lot of wealth, particularly from a financial perspective, right? So what we bring to workplace values is around autonomy and work-life balance, because you kind of went to work, you came home, and then like weekends was your time to recharge. So that's the kind of values that we bring to because we were taught to, you had to get on with it, right? Get on with life and make things happen. So our communication preferences for the Gen Xers is very much direct communication, informal, and we were exposed to email. It's when email first started coming out. And so we know how to communicate from an email perspective. The strengths that we bring to the table, very much from a Gen X point of view, is our adaptability, because we had to learn to adapt. We had to learn to make do with what we had. And if we didn't have, we either went without or we made a plan. And so that's very much where our independence comes in and our resourcefulness comes in. We just get on with it, right? And I'm not saying it's for any of these, I'm not saying good or bad, right or wrong. It's just how we've evolved going through with the environments that we've been exposed to. There's obviously pros and cons to both of this. If we look at it in more in depth, which we don't have time to do on this call, but that's a whole different discussion. So things that can challenge us is often feeling overlooked. We have some skepticism, and we can be resistant to change, because we can, we've seen very much what the previous generations went through. And it was also that generation, if you think about the Ford, you can have any color Ford as long as it's black, so there wasn't a lot of choices. There wasn't a lot of those things. So very much that if you didn't go out and make things happen, then you kind of got, you were overlooked. So we can be very skeptical about things, especially new ways of doing things, new ideas, because we were so used to the tried and tested, which is why we can tend to be resistant to change. Our development preferences is we look and want opportunities to upskill ourselves, and we want autonomy when it comes to our learning style. And that's because we had to become resourceful. So we had to learn how to become resourceful, which was learning how to do it ourselves, or finding a way to do it, or teaching ourselves, or being exposed to some kind of educational system or process. And also Gen Xers, we obviously had more career choices than what the generation before us had. So that's where we also had opportunities to upskill ourselves from a career perspective. And our preferred leadership style is hands off. We want to get on with it. We want to be, independent. We want to take charge and control and make decisions and get on with things. We're pretty much doers, and we get the job done.
Paula, sorry, I'm just listening to this, and it makes so much sense. I think for anyone on this call, like, to start understanding that baby boomer generation, if you look at it, I mean, if you speak to older people, their values are respect authority, like earn your stripes, because that's what they had to do. And then, as you said, just talking about the Gen X, looking at myself, I mean, I think in the last 20 years, how many of us have had to go through change management programs because we're resistant to change? I think that's so interesting. And there was no Google. So we had to do it ourselves. We had to learn ourselves. So I think you start making a lot of sense, in terms of identifying those. Thank you. Carry on.
Yeah, we had Britannica encyclopedias and info for. So yeah, it's very much around the environment that we've been exposed to, how that shapes and influences us. And also, the messages that we received growing up. So for example, children are meant to be seen and not heard, and don't back chat or talk back, because then you're considered being, cheeky and undisciplined, for example. So those things play a role as well. Then we get the millennials, which is people born between 1981 and 1996. So from an age point of view, that would be around 44 to 29 years. And I'm going to kind of roughly refer to this as the STEM era, because this is when a lot of focus started being put on science, technology, etc., and from a school subject point of view, and science, technology, English, and maths. That we, started becoming more and more important, or focus areas from an education point of view. And so with these millennials, they have seen the Gen Xers and the baby boomers through their own eyes. And what they've seen is literally people that have worked themselves to the bone, people that have been loyal, but have had and this is perception versus reality, very little reciprocation in return. In other words, they've seen people waste their lives because they've worked until they've had to retire or been forced to retire, and only then could they start living their lives. And the millennials and the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, which we'll get to, are very much adamant that they are not subscribing to that kind of lifestyle. They want to live life now. They want to experience life now. They don't want to wait until they're 65 and or forced to retire to start experiencing life. And so for the millennials, when it comes to workplace values, it's very much for them around purpose. How does my work and my life have purpose? And what does that purpose look like and feel like and taste like and experience? And so they're very much around growth. They want growth, and they're very much around flexibility and collaboration, right? They've seen parents struggle in terms of, trying to make ends meet and pay bills and all of those kind of things. And they more around, we don't have to do it alone when we can do it together. So very much around collaboration. And so their communication preferences around being very collaborative. I want input. I want to hear what people have to say. I'm very open. And they're also very much a digital communication style, because they've grown up in the digital era. This is when, social media like Facebook and smartphones, or Blackberries to be before then, and then before the smartphones came in. So they've grown up in this digital era where they've been exposed to digital communication. So their strengths are very much, they are tech savvy, but they are team oriented and values driven, as in purpose and what is right, and what is fair and what is of justice, and what is also having a positive impact. So just think about the environmental impact, and those kind of things. And they're very much coachable. They want to be coached and mentored. They want that immediate feedback. And this is where the challenge comes in to managing these generations, because they perceive to be as impatient and job hopping. If they stay with you for 2 years, you're lucky, which causes frustration from an employer's point of view, because we've invested all of this time and effort and resources and money into skilling and training these people, and then they're not loyal, they leave us, right? And they very much are dependent on feedback. They want immediate feedback. They want to know, am I doing the job right? If not, where can I improve? How can I improve? And what do I need to do to improve? And so those are some of the frustrations and the challenges that leaders and all organizations are having. And so their development preferences are pretty much around continuous feedback. I don't want to wait 6 months down the line for my performance appraisal for you to tell me what I did wrong 6 months ago. I want on-the-job coaching and I want immediate feedback, because they've grown up in an immediate world. Instant gratification. You swipe left, swipe right, and you've got access to information, right? So they want that continuous feedback, and they want visibility of their career path. And this is also where it can fall over, because often discussions happen at a senior level or a leadership level, that we've identified this person as talent or future leadership potential, and we want to put a development plan in place with them, but we don't have the conversation with them. And we don't show them that we actually see potential in them, and we've mapped out a future for them. We don't have those discussions with them, right? So there's a perception that there is no growth opportunities available, because in today's world, realistically, we have very flat structures. So if they don't see progression upwards, how do we grow people outwards, and they can still see that they are growing and developing and that there's some benefit for them? And their preferred leadership style is very much coachable and collaborative. I want to feel mentored and coached. I want feedback. I want to grow. I want to know where I'm going wrong, and how I can be supported in doing this. So that's on the millennial side. Then we've got the Gen Zs, which were born 1997 to 2012. So pretty much 28 to 13-year-old age gap or brackets, right? And their workplace values are very much around authenticity, inclusivity, well-being, and security. This is the era that grew up in the tech era, and also they experienced COVID as well. A large portion of them experienced COVID, particularly either from a sort of a high school, university point of view, or graduate programs entering into the workforce. So their experience is very different to the rest of ours. And so they're very much about being authentic and real, and they're not afraid to call you and or an organization out if they feel you're not being authentic. So think about conversations around products and or services that are not being true to their word. So if you say that these products are not being tested on animals, they will hold you accountable to that. Your word is your credibility. And if you're not being authentic, you will lose credibility very fast. They also want inclusivity. So they've grown up in an era where, the gender spectrum is very fluid. There is very much equality because young girls or women are coming through. They have had more opportunities to develop and grow from a career perspective. Also, women have become much more independent from a financial point of view. They're earning the same as, or in some cases, more than their male counterparts. So it has caused a bit of a dynamic shift there. And they're very much about well-being. And often what we get from companies that we work with is this generation can't cope with stress, and they're constantly talking about mental health and wellness, and they need mental health breaks or mental health days. Okay. And they're very much looking for security in terms of knowing that they are valued and appreciated, and their contribution is appreciated, and they feel secure in their career path. So their communication preferences are instant because they've grown up in an instant world. It's very succinct because they have a short attention span. Because they've grown up in that era where I go onto my phone, I tap a few keys, and I get instant communication, and I get it in a summarized version. They're very much visual and app-based. They've grown up in an app environment. So if you just think about your smartphones from way back when the first smartphone came out to smartphones now, I think you've got over, 100 different apps that your phone comes preloaded with when you buy your smartphone, right? Or upgrade, because apps are constantly being developed. So their strengths are they're very much digitally fluent, and they're innovative, they're very much inclusive, and they're very quick learners. And they expect the same in the workplace environment. So if you give this generation the challenge of, starting a business, literally within 3 hours, they have created a website, they've created an online store, they've got products, and they've already got a business up and running within 3 hours. That's how digitally savvy they are. Okay. And there was the latest Gen Z report that was distributed a couple of months ago. I'll find it and I can share it with you. But these people are, on average, they have around 8 bank accounts, and they are using crypto as a payment method or payment platform. Okay. So they are already innovative and thinking outside the box more than what we give them credit for. But yes, with that comes the challenges which organizations and leaders struggle with, which is their inexperience from the, I'm going to say, the traditional norms and the traditional way that businesses operate. They're challenged, obviously, with their stress levels, and they have high expectations. They want that instant feedback and that instant, satisfaction because of their development preferences, which is they want fast growth because they're used to being in a fast world. So they want bite-sized learning, so micro learning, so online platforms, YouTube, TikTok, short audio clips or podcasts, those kind of things. Very much digital learning and mentoring. They definitely want mentoring as well. And their preferred leadership style is supportive, empathetic, and inclusive. Okay. So support me in where I'm at, support me in that my well-being is important to me. And what we have seen is from surveys that have been done, this generation is not afraid to say no to job offers if they feel that the company is not authentically invested in employees' well-being, and they don't support well-being, and they don't have support structures in place that talks to well-being. They would rather turn down a job and go and find an organization that talks to that and supports them in that, because they've seen the previous generation struggle from a mental health point of view and having to kind of, suck it up and get on with it and just make things happen, but at the cost of what? And also, we have seen, obviously since COVID, there's been a spotlight put on mental health and well-being. And, we've seen a spike in, I'm going to use the word loosely, disorders, but things like ADHD, being on the spectrum, and, depression and those kind of things. So they've seen this and they've witnessed it and they hear about it all the time because there is more data available on it, and particularly around burnout as well, which has become a big focus in today's world. And so these are the generations that we are currently, faced with when it comes to workplace environments. But I want to quickly touch on the Gen Alphas who are still coming through the system. And they're born from 2013 onwards. So they're 12 years upwards, or between 12 and 28. So some of them not in the workforce yet, but they are coming through as your next workforce and your next generation of employees. So you kind of need to be aware of them. Their workplace values are very much innovative, digital fluency, and creativity and equity. They want what is equal and fair. Their communication preferences are very much AI assisted because they are now growing up in an AI world, and it's visual first and gamification. They're growing up in a world where gaming, and it spills over into the Gen Zs as well, but gaming is a big thing. You can have a career now as a gamer, and you can earn a lot of money as a gamer or an influencer, all those kind of things, right? And a lot of apps and platforms are also gamified. Just think about those of you that are on Discovery and get Discovery Vitality points, you get your free smoothies, okay? That's one form of gamification where you get rewards for your efforts, okay? And so their strengths are they're very hyper digital in terms of their fluency and creativity, rapid adaptability, and believe it or not, they are very entrepreneurial because they've seen and been exposed to the high levels of unemployment out there for various reasons. And so they are learning to adapt and make their own plans and come up with their own businesses and their own ways of earning money. And when I say businesses, I'm not talking traditional business structures, okay? The challenges for them is very short attention span. They're very dependent on screens and the ability to regulate their emotional sort of levels because they haven't yet reached that sort of level of maturity yet. They're still going through that development stage. So their development preferences is very much interactive, AI-powered learning, very much immediate application. And their preferred leadership style is around facilitative. They want facilitation and facilitating their experience in their environment. They want it to be tech integrated and very much values-based and co-creative. Let's create this together. And so that's in a nutshell. I know it was a lot of info overload. So maybe what I should just do quickly is put up the one pager, and I will send it out to everybody. That you can have a look at, that you can refer to back as a cheat sheet. But so this is just what I've been sharing with you in a nutshell. So I will send that out to everybody so that you can have a look at it. So I just want to stop there because I know that was a lot of info and just any questions or thoughts on that?
Wow, Paula, I think it's quite exciting. I think what it shows is that there are these 5 very unique groups of people that show up in a workplace. And I think you can understand now why there is often workplace conflict between the different generations and maybe genuine misunderstanding. People seem to be drawn to people like us. If you think like me, act like me, work like me, and react like me, then I want to work with you. It takes a lot more emotional energy to work with people who are different. So I think that's it's quite exciting to see. I want to hear what you've got to say going forward. But I also have realized something about leadership. The old-fashioned approach of leadership was, I'll treat you like I want to be treated. And I think what we've realized is leadership has got nothing to do with us, how we want to be treated. We've got to treat people where they're at, the way they want or need to be treated. And it takes a lot of personal I think self-awareness. It takes a lot of EQ. It takes a lot of understanding and stripping away of biases. So it's sort of coming in, with a fresh slate. And I'm sure many of us on this call can attest to the fact that we've had situations where we've gone in with a negative bias about somebody else just because they're different, act differently, value different things, show up differently, that we think they are not as good as us or not as committed or whatever those terms are. So I think the next question, which I think is the nub of what we wanted to talk about today, what can leaders do to engage with each generation in a way that works for them? I realize that, I often think of leadership as older people managing younger people, but it's very different. Often younger people are managing every other generation other than their own. So can we delve into that now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you've got some companies where you've got, CEOs that are, in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're managing a diverse workforce. So it's the script is flipped both ways. I think some of the common leadership myths that we do hear is, leaders saying, "Oh, I don't have time for one-on-ones. I don't have time to sit and be with each one of them and mollycoddle them or baby them. They'll come to me if there's an issue, or that's HR's job, or they're not babies or students anymore. They need to start acting like adults." Those are some of the things that we hear. And while on the one hand, there may be a little bit of truth to that, on the other hand, it's about managing time, right? And making time for engaging with each one of your employees and getting to know them on a human level and not just the work level, because at the end of the day, we are humans and we go to work as a whole person. There's no just the 9 to 5 version of us. Whether we like it or not, we take work to home and home to work. So from a generation point of view, I think when it comes to the baby boomers, what motivates them is acknowledging their legacy. So, their experience and their tenure, while involving them in mentoring others, because they're really good at that. And that's where you share knowledge and you pass knowledge on, right? And that kind of talks to respecting their experience. It offers them, I'm going to say, status recognition, and I don't mean status in a negative way. I'm talking, they do have wisdom to share, and it allows them to contribute in a meaningful way that they feel valued, right? Whereas with the Gen Xers, it's around providing them with flexibility and control over how their work gets done. They want that autonomy. It's very important to them. And it gives them a feeling of being trusted and aligned with their independent nature, because they dislike micromanagement. In terms of the millennials, it's around linking work to purpose. Purpose is very important for them, and they want regular coaching. So how can you connect work to a meaning or purpose that offers growth, because they're very much around growth, and that satisfies their feedback and development needs. They want that feedback. They want to know where and how they can develop and improve and do better, because they do have aspirations to grow and evolve. Where the Gen Zs, it's around how can you use tech or enable tech check-ins or short-term growth paths and offer them that psychological safety. So around the mental health stuff, and that meets their need for flexibility when it comes to digital communication and real-time feedback and visible growth opportunities for them. So an example of tech check-ins would be, there's WhatsApps, there's Slack, there's Teams. It depends on what platforms you're using, but also ask them. Ask each one of these generations, how do you prefer me to communicate with you? Do you want me to send you a voice note? Do you want me to send you a text? Do you want me to send you an email? Do you want us to schedule a one-on-one, And then for the Gen Alphas coming through, it's leveraging innovation, creativity, and digital integration. They very much want a platform for visibility that satisfies their need for innovation and fairness and co-creation. So that's in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot more to this, but those are the ways that you can do it. But then also it's around one-on-ones and making time to have one-on-ones with your people to get to know them and what drives them, what motivates them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paula. You've just said something that is such a simple question, yet I'm sitting there and it's like hit me with a hammer. You said, how do you want me to communicate with you? And I think it's such a good leadership question, because we communicate with people how we think we'd like to be communicated with. So I think that's so, so important. Also, just in my experience dealing with people who, who are managers in companies, often they just say, I don't have the time. People seem to have this overwhelming sense of overwhelm. They're burdened, they have deadlines, and they are struggling themselves. So to find the time to meet with people one-on-one is something I think that we've got to prioritize above the tasks. And I think we're living in a world where people need so much more peopling, but we have gone very task orientated. Paula, are there any other comments you want to share on how we can communicate better with our teams and organizations?
Yeah, I think you've got to make time to connect, and communication equals connection. So if you're not communicating with your team, you're not connecting with your team.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking task level, right? Yes, there's the time and place for those one-on-ones where they are status updates or give me a report on where you're at and what you're doing and what progress you've made. There's time for that. And in today's world, it's unrealistic to think or expect a one-on-one to be an hour long, right?
Yeah.
We don't have time for that. So we have to make time. So your one-on-ones can be as simple as a 10-minute catch-up, and you can ask one question. And if you are really tuned in and really listening to what is being said and what is not being said, you can pick up where this person is struggling, where they may need support, where you may need to step in, or what is actually motivating them at this point in time. So a simple question you could ask is, what is challenging you in your life right now? It could be personal, it could be professional, it doesn't matter. But if you're listening to what's challenging them, you'll understand what is impacting their focus and potentially their productivity levels or delivery levels or quality of work. Another question you could ask is, what's exciting you or bringing you joy at the moment? And just listen. And it could be personal or professional. And you could then tap into, well, this kind of work actually drives this person. They like to be thrown into work where they have to analyze data and come up with, the trends that's in this data. And that energizes them. So how can you then give them more of that kind of work? So once you learn to get to know who your people are and what motivates them or what drives them, you can then start looking at, how do I allocate tasks that plays to their strengths, and how can we then surround each other and complement each other, because we understand the individual strengths and the collective strengths of a team.
I love that. I mean, Paula, I think that's fantastic. I think so often, catch-up meetings with staff members are very much about the numbers, the figures, the activities, which are obviously important. But I think, no, there's a statistic. I make up statistics, but I think this one's real. And it says that we can't spend more than 25% of our day doing work we hate and still enjoy our job. So I think just asking that question about what is challenging you, can possibly lead not only positive challenge, but negative in terms of boredom, negative in terms of stress. So I think it's really important to try and eliminate things that are not working to people's strengths, or try and help them cope with them. But I think the magic happens in a business when people are working to their passions. And I think if we can get alignment as much as possible of where people's sweet spot is, where they are passionate, that lovely concept of, I'm good at it, I love it, and the world needs it, and then get them to do more and more of that. A question I try and ask in one-on-ones is, how can I help you win? It's not a management question. It's not about holding a big stick, but just really coming with us the posture of saying, I'm here to help you, and how can I help you win? So I think that's been quite an important one with me. And I also think what I've picked up is, if you are connecting with someone, you might think, well, I've got the 15 minutes for this person, but you might be connecting with them in the wrong way that their generation typically doesn't enjoy. So, for instance, I've got a 20-year-old daughter. You ask her to phone someone, you'd swear it was asking her to go to Mars. She will do anything to avoid. So imagine you picking up the phone to a young 20-something staff member and wanting to have a chat. You kind of putting them in that unsafe mode where they are fear-filled. So I think that's so, so important. And I also think give people notice. Can we meet next week, rather than just, dropping that on them? I think that's important. Paula, before I ask for any questions, is there anything else you'd like to share that you haven't yet done so?
No, I think, just again reinforcing that communication is the recipe to success for you as a leader, but also your team and the organization as a whole, because there is so much stats out there, and I'm happy to share them, that, when people feel heard, they are 4.6 times more likely to do their best work. And and psychological safety is the number one factor of high performing teams. And recognition, and when I say recognition, I'm not talking monetary recognition. I'm talking recognition around appreciation, saying you matter with actions, not just words, or acknowledging someone's input, creates a sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging increases performance by 56%, which in turn lowers burnout and boosts loyalty, and gets an individual to show up more and be more productive and creative, innovative, and collaborative. And so communication is key. And as leaders, we need to learn how to communicate with each generation differently, because it's less about tasks and it's more about people.
Absolutely. And I think we're living in this big AI world. I've noticed a lot of my clients who are working very remotely or in a hybrid fashion feel like their communication has become infinitely worse. I think, we're so used to, chatting to somebody at the water cooler or having a coffee. And I think just that connection, I think people are desperate to feel that they matter and, just wanting to connect and wanting to know that they're doing a great job, or knowing that they're seen. I think that's so important. I also think for many of us, this is the first time we might be leading different generations, and to, have open conversations with staff, not necessarily to apologize, but to acknowledge that this is a work in progress, that you might not have it all together as a leader, that you are battling to understand their generation because they're different to you, and acknowledging that you're open to learn. I think that's such an important thing. I don't see any questions at the moment. What I'd like to do is I'd actually like to call Cheryl McKinnon onto the call. Cheryl is the CEO and founder of a really dynamic company called The Science of Change. And Cheryl has generously offered two profiles today. One is on DISC and one is on values. And why I called Cheryl on is I believe self-awareness is the first step of growth. And we're talking about the different generations. It's very hard to understand other people if you don't understand yourself. So Cheryl, can I hand over to you? And I know you've got two very valuable prizes. So thank you. Over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you. Morning, guys. So, we often talk about managing generations in the workplace as if we were dealing with completely different species. So we have our boomers, Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Zs, as we've heard this morning. But at the end of the day, folks, all we actually are just people, and we're just trying to contribute and feel valued and be understood. So sure, each generation has its own perspective, shaped by the world they grew up in, and those experiences influence how we communicate, what we expect from leaders, and what motivates us at work. But when we strip away the labels, what really helps us connect and collaborate better is understanding each individual person, how they behave, and what they value. And that's why today's giveaway, I've chosen two tools that I believe really help bridge the generational divide. And as Cindy mentioned, the DISC assessment and the values assessment. So let's just start with the DISC. The DISC really helps us understand how we behave and communicate. So are you as a leader more dominant or direct, or are you more people-focused and enthusiastic, more steady and supportive, or maybe more analytical and precise? So when we work across generations, so many of our clashes or misunderstandings aren't about age. They're about communication style, as Paula pointed out just now. The communication style is everything. For example, if you look at Gen Z team members, they might prefer quick, direct feedback, while a Gen X or baby boomer leader might prefer a more formal, structured discussion. So understanding your DISC style really helps you recognize those differences and helps you to adapt. So then instead of taking things personally, when you're part of a team, you start managing the dynamics intentionally. And yeah, we have a look at working strengths and what motivates each person, because as Cindy and Paula alluded to, it's about managing those work strengths and bringing the best out of the people. Then there's the value assessment, which looks at why we do what we do. And that gets to the heart of what drives us, guys. Things like achievement, creativity, security, or making a difference. Those are values. And this is where generational differences really show up. One person might value stability because they've seen how quickly things can change, while others might crave innovation and flexibility because they've grown up in a world that moves fast. When leaders understand what people value and not just what they do, you can motivate and manage in ways that actually connect. So these two assessments, the DISC and values, they really work beautifully together, and there's a wonderful golden thread that pulls through both, because our motives drive our behaviors and our behaviors drive our values. So one helps you understand how you operate, while the other one really looks at, helps you understand the why. So both are incredible giveaways today and give really great insight into how you manage yourself and how to bring out the best in others. And in the spirit of today's topic, understanding generations by understanding people, I'm giving away one DISC assessment and one values assessment. And both will help you answer a simple but powerful question: how do I manage and bring out the best in me and in others? Thanks, Cindy.
Fantastic. Cheryl, can you pick a number between 1 and 46?
I'm going to go with 21.
21, that's Stephen Lee. Is Stephen on the call? Let's have a look. Just looking for that. Okay, can you pick the next number? Because
I'm going to go with
we will-
14.
14. Alison Naidu. I see Alison is on the call. Alison, you've got a DISC profile. Congratulations. We will connect with you. And I'm just
going to go
checking.
with 11.
Okay, I don't think Stephen's on the call. So number 11 is Haley Buerta or Bertha.
Haley Bertha.
Yes, she is on the call.
All right.
Fantastic. Congrats. I'll get Cheryl to communicate with you. So congratulations to Haley and to Alison. Cheryl, can I ask you to put your email address into the chat? And
Yes,
Paula, can I also ask you to put your email address into the chat? So just to finish off, there was one question which I just wanted to get Paula to answer, if you can. Paula, this is from Alison. What are the pitfalls for managers and organizations who do not adapt to multi-generational workforces? Some might argue that these issues are first world concepts. So what is, let's just assume a company says, well, you know what, yes, everyone is different, but we are not pandering to differences. We're not tailoring our approaches. We're not taking heed of it. What do you imagine would happen to those organizations?
Yeah, I think the risk there is that you are not going to attract talent, because the experience share is going to be that this organization or leadership is stuck in its ways and it's archaic and it's not evolving, and that could have a potential impact on the company itself and the bottom line. And then also just in terms of being able to retain talent. So looking at talent attraction, talent retention, talent development. And yeah, so it's learning to evolve as the landscape evolves. And there's, first of all, that self-accountability around how do I upskill myself from an individual level, whether I'm a manager or not, that I can function and operate in a multi-generational environment. And then how do leaders and the organization as a whole make space for this kind of involvement, because you can't not in today's world. If you're not looking at how to evolve in a multi-generational workplace, you're going to be left behind for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paula. And I think today's been quite an eye-opener and a challenge, I think, for each one of us, if we are leaders, listening to this talk, to ask ourselves, am I adapting? And I think self-awareness is one of the first steps, and taking the steps to understand what is the style, what is the preferences of the different generations. I think respect comes in. Respect is really important. Just because somebody's not like me doesn't mean they are better or worse or different or not as committed. And to be mindful, I think, of those stereotypes. So just to end off, thank you for listening today. I hope you got some insights, and I hope that these are practical things that you can put into your management toolkit going forward, to go, I see where this person's coming from. I'm approaching them from my own standpoint, or gosh, I remember that this generation prefers this, and really tailoring our approach to the people we serve. And also just to encourage, if anyone is thinking, gosh, I need to understand myself more, or somebody in my team, Cheryl does do discus, she does the disc assessments, she does many other assessments, so reach out to Cheryl at Science Change. If you are thinking, I might need a little bit of mentoring or some help in terms of my own self-leadership, you can reach out to Paula as well. I think the best investment anyone can make in our leadership is in developing ourselves. So thank you very much on behalf of Pro Talent. And I just want to say thank you for being part of today's webinar, and I hope you got something great out of it. Paula, thank you so much. And Cheryl, thank you so much as well. It's been wonderful having you both on the call with us. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And to the two winners, we will be emailing you shortly for your assessments. Thank you, everyone.